Unit 8.4 Answering Questions. As an educator, one of the most common questions you will ask is, does anyone have any questions? If, in response, you are asked questions you think the class can answer, redirect them to the class to encourage active learning. It's best to know the answer before redirecting questions to students or trainees. You're asked a question that you can't answer. Don't be defensive or fake it, just say you don't know or ask to get back to the student or trainee later. Jumping on the internet can also help as you and the students discover the answer together. Try not to deflect questions you don't know the answers to students or trainees without stating that you don't know the answer. After a few times of being found out, you might have credibility issues. Responding to incorrect answers. Try not to react negatively to a student or trainee who gives an incorrect response. Try to be sensitive to the learner's feelings. Do not get upset or start losing your patience. Educators have the patience of saints, right? Reset your thoughts and try to identify the learning gap or misunderstanding. Getting angry or upset may decrease participation in the ongoing discussion or Q&A session, as others will not want to risk responding for fear of being chastised. To minimize the potential for embarrassment, acknowledge the effort and then redirect the question to the whole class. For instance, you might say, "That's not quite the answer I was looking for. Can anyone think of another answer? I can see how you might come up with that idea. Who else has a different idea? It's a valid attempt. Thanks for giving us your answer, but I'm looking for a more specific answer. Can anyone else try to answer the question?" You're asked an extensive question. Break the question down into smaller parts and keep your answer as concise as possible without omitting key details. The more logically you break the answer down, the better it will be to explain and for the students to understand. Example, trainee asks, "Why do I need to take over 1,000 water samples for this research project at different times of the day in different places every day of the week for 4 weeks? Example, answer from educator or trainer responds, "If we only say take 100 samples, the sample size would be too small. Multiple daily measurements at specific times and places using more samples will give us more specific data. If we only did 1 week of daily sampling, the research might be affected by a single pollutant event, but over 4 weeks we could measure those samples and analyze the data more thoroughly and maybe even identify the polluter if there's a pattern occurring in our data analysis." Does everyone understand the reasoning behind the minimums in the project requirements? You're asked a question you already answered. Try answering the question again. But if the student or trainee still doesn't understand, and the rest of the group looks bored, ask to talk about it in more detail at a more convenient time during or after the class is over. The student could have either not understood the answer or they just were not listening properly. They could possibly have a learning impairment that they are challenged with. If you are the only person who can answer the question, example, "How many milliliters are there in a gallon?" Try to rephrase the question. Ask the students to identify the issues they are having in answering the question if you cannot simplify the question or rephrase it. Put the rephrased question back to the class. Rephrased example, "How many fluid ounces are there in a gallon?" Ask if the students understand the question now. Then maybe you can now ask, "How many milliliters are in a fluid ounce?" and work your way to your intended question using the number of fluid ounces in a gallon. You might have to re-explain the theory, the content or concept in a different way before asking a specific question you would want to ask again. You're asked a question you think is stupid. Remember, not everyone is as familiar with the material as you are. Some students might have undiagnosed learning impairments. Some students will have language barriers to contend with. Some students want to be difficult and test you. Be patient, take a deep breath, analyze the situation and then plan a response. Maybe use some probing questions. You're asked a controversial question. This is good. It means people are thinking critically. Take your time in answering. Don't be pressured into saying anything you don't believe is true or could be scrutinized later as factually incorrect or worse. Be careful of your opinions. Not everyone will agree with you, and a class or training session is not meant to be a personal platform for spreading one's personal agenda. Educators should always be professional. Politics, religion, sex, family and personal finances are generally the major topics educators get into trouble for, as sharing their opinions might cause conflict. It's best to avoid and not to engage in dialogue on these emotional topics. If you are an ESL teacher, make sure you know your cultural do's and don'ts of the country you are in. In places like the Middle East, family is a hot-button topic, especially if you are asking unsolicited questions about mothers, sisters and daughters. Know the culture. You're asked a hostile question, stay calm. Rise above it by sticking to the content. Don't get derailed. Again, it could be about language strength, or the usual suspects in your class trying to put you off your game. Take a deep breath, analyze the situation and then plan a response. Maybe use some probing questions. Notice how this response is the same response I advocated for a stupid question being asked. You're asked a question you don't want to answer. Tell the student or trainee that you respectfully decline to answer their question, and when appropriate, offer to meet with the student later to discuss your response. Sometimes you might give a reason in front of the class to questions being asked about your private life. You can state that you need to maintain a professional relationship with your students or trainees. That would set a precedent for learners thinking of asking any future family-related questions. If everyone wants you to respond, you should consider the reasons why and how it may be either useful or detrimental to the training or yourself and/or your trainees. Remember, you are a mentor and role model. If non-course related questions are asked, you can decide whether it's appropriate to answer them or not. If students persist in demanding you answer unrelated questions, it would be best to warn them and follow that up with administrative action if need be. Always be kind, be caring, but ultimately always be professional. Any form of harassment cuts both ways. You're asked a closed question. A closed question is one for which you can answer with a simple yes or no. Instead of giving a one-word answer, try to add some detail to let the student or trainee know that you don't think the question is inconsequential. Please hit the subscribe button for more updates. Thanks for watching this video. More updates.